The rain was relentless that afternoon, drumming on the tin roof of the small café like an impatient drummer keeping time with the chaos inside. The bell above the door had rung 3 times in the last minute, but each time it wasn't the person Samir was hoping for. He sat near the corner table, shoulders slumped, one hand around a half-cold coffee he couldn't afford, the other resting on a stack of job applications that felt heavier than bricks. Across from him, his daughter Layla sat with her coloring book, her small legs swinging under the chair, oblivious to the gloom clouding her father's face. She hummed softly to herself, coloring a picture of a sunrise in bright yellows and pinks, as if she could will the day to get better. Samir was a single father, 2 years into a life he hadn't planned for. His wife, Hannah, had passed away after a sudden illness, leaving him with a 5-year-old girl, no savings, and the crushing weight of grief. The past year had been a cycle of rejection letters, temporary jobs, and late rent notices. Today, he had an interview for a kitchen assistant position at a hotel downtown, a job that wouldn't fix everything, but would mean warmth, stability, and maybe a little hope. But the interview had gone terribly. The manager barely glanced at his resume before saying they'd keep it on file. Samir had walked out into the cold rain with Layla, the rejection stinging worse than the weather. He stopped at the cafe mostly to buy time, to think of what he'd tell his landlord, and how to keep his little girl's world from crumbling. That's when the commotion began. The bell above the door rang again, but this time, the energy shifted. A man in a tailored charcoal suit swept in, his presence commanding, his voice sharp and clipped in Arabic as he spoke into his phone. The man's olive-toned face was handsome but drawn tight with frustration, his dark eyes glinting with restrained fury. 2 men in black coats followed him, clearly security. The café's barista stiffened as the man's voice rose. Even without understanding the words, it was obvious, he was furious. The stranger was Sheikh Zayed Al-Mansour, though no one in the café knew it yet. One of the wealthiest businessmen in the Middle East, Zayed was in the city for a high-stakes investment deal. But the meeting had ended in disaster, betrayal by someone he trusted. He was minutes away from leaving the country altogether, his heart heavy with bitterness, his mind a storm of anger. He ended the call abruptly, his voice low but icy, and turned to leave. The barista, trembling, hurried to get out of his way. People avoided looking at him. Zayed moved like a man who could shatter glass with a glance. But then, before anyone could stop her, a small voice called out. La Tazan, Sayyidi. The words, clear and perfectly pronounced in Arabic, froze Zayed in his tracks. Do not be sad, sir. He turned slowly, his eyes scanning the room until they landed on Layla. She had climbed down from her chair and stood there with her little coloring book in hand, looking up at him with the kind of fearless sincerity only a child possessed. Zayed blinked, caught off guard. Mada Kulti, he asked softly. What did you say? Layla smiled shyly and held out the picture she had been coloring. It was a sunrise, big and bright, with smiling faces in the clouds. My mama used to say that to my baba, in your language. She said the sun always comes back, even after the rain. Something inside Zayed shifted, no, cracked. Those exact words, in almost the same gentle tone, had been spoken to him years ago by his own mother, in the days when his father had been ill and their family fortune uncertain. It was a phrase he hadn't heard in decades, buried under years of business, loss, and distance. How do you know Arabic? He asked, his voice gentler now. Layla shrugged. Mama taught me. She said words can be bridges. Samir, embarrassed, stood quickly and reached for his daughter's hand. I'm so sorry, sir, she's very friendly. We'll let you go. But Zayed didn't move toward the door. His eyes stayed on the little girl, then lifted to her father. He took in Samir's worn jacket, the tired lines in his face, the stack of papers on the table. And in an instant, his sharp instincts pieced it together, unemployed, struggling, but still raising a child who spoke with kindness to strangers. What is your name? Zayed asked. Samir, he replied cautiously. And this is Layla. Zayed's gaze lingered on the coloring book. May I sit? Samir hesitated, but nodded. The billionaire took a seat, folding his hands on the table. The security men stepped back, confused. They spoke for nearly an hour. Zayed asked questions, not the kind you ask out of politeness, but the kind that peel back layers. He learned about Hannah, about how she had been a language teacher, about the illness that took her. He learned about Samir's struggle to find steady work while keeping Layla in school. And he learned how, despite everything, Samir never let his daughter feel the heaviness he carried. Zayed told his own story, growing up in Abu Dhabi, losing his father young, his mother working tirelessly to keep the family afloat. He told of the betrayal that had nearly cost him millions that day, and how he had been ready to walk away from the deal and the city altogether. I was ready to believe there was no honesty left in the world, Zayed admitted quietly. Until your daughter spoke. Layla giggled. Mama said the world's not bad, it just needs more helpers. When they finally stood, Zayed shook Samir's hand firmly. I came here for a business deal, he said. I will leave with something far more valuable. The next day, Samir got a call from the manager of the very hotel that had turned him down. They suddenly had an opening, and not for a kitchen assistant, but for a management trainee position with excellent pay and benefits. Confused, Samir accepted. It wasn't until weeks later that he learned the truth. Zayed had quietly invested in the hotel and personally requested Samir be hired. The billionaire had also set up a trust fund for Layla's education, in honor of the little girl who reminded me the sun will always rise. Years later, when Layla graduated from university, Zayed was there in the audience, his eyes misty. And Samir never forgot that one small act of a child's kindness had turned a moment of fury into a lifetime of hope. Sometimes, the most powerful bridges are built with the smallest words. And sometimes, those words are spoken by a 6-year-old in the middle of a rainy afternoon.